Well, I hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving weekend, because that was not exactly how we were hoping the weekend would end. Penn State drops a tough one in a snowy East Lansing to Michigan State. Once again, Tim made in Black Sheep Diaries, joined by my trusty BSD colleague, per usual, Marty Leap. Marty, how are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating on a lot of fronts, not just the loss, but that was very much a game that was there for the taking. And, as we'll get into, I really felt going into halftime where Penn State was at and the fact they're getting at the ball to start the second half, they had a chance to really take control of the game and just never did. And it's frustrating because as we've come on here and talked about seemingly every game for the last 6-7 weeks now, it's the same problems haunting this team, and in a lot of ways it's the same problems that have haunted this team in losses throughout the James Franklin era.
Right. It just felt like another one. Just felt like kind of what's become the theme of this season. Had their chances. You're waiting for them to really take over, maybe, deliver that strike that puts them over the edge, and it just never quite came. And I think what really stuck out to me though was just how the defense had probably their worst performance of the year, especially those first two drives.
You would think 4-down territory here.
I mean, especially the second touchdown drive. Penn State pins them at the 1 yard line, just where you think they should have them, and Kenneth Walker breaks off a huge run, almost took it to the house in the first play, almost had a 9-yard touchdown, but nonetheless, they still end up ultimately scoring a touchdown. That drive, go up 14-zip, and suddenly you're thinking, oh boy, is we're gonna get routed here? But the team did strike back. They started throwing the ball a bit more. Threw a couple strikes to Jahan Dotson to tie the game. And then Sparty answered with a field goal of their own. Penn State once again was throwing the ball, moving the chains. Got inside the red zone, couldn't quite punch it in. So they try a field goal. Jordan Stout doesn't go through. So 17-14 and a half. Then second half, Penn State's defense, starting to get it together a bit more. They come up with a huge pick six to take their first lead of the game. Missed the extra point, but still Penn State's ahead for the first time. And you're thinking, all right, there's some real momentum here, get something going. But no, Michigan State, they drive down the field, and this was the other thing that maybe you can get into this too. But what was really infuriating with the defense, even once they quelled the bleeding from early on, they still seemed to give up way too many third and longs, and of course there was that 4th and 15 conversion that Sparty had for the game-sealing touchdown, what ended up being the game-sealing touchdown late in the game. But just, third and long, 4th and long, situations where they had done a great job all year getting off the field. Today they were just bafflingly terrible, and the tackling was just, it looked like, 2020 season levels of tackling, like they hadn't been practicing in a while because of COVID restrictions.
Yeah, I'm with you. The defense really was let down today. And actually, one of the things that I'm putting in my takeaways article for Black Shoe Diaries was the defense time and time again being given so many opportunities to get off the field and just not taking advantage of it. Like you said, that 4th and 15, that was the biggest play of the game. Penn State goes down the field and winds up scoring their next possession. That would have given them the lead with, 40 seconds left or whatever it was. It's 4th and 15. Michigan State's going to throw to the end zone there, and they throw up the jump ball and they catch it. Just so many times in this game, they could have gotten off the field and they didn't. Michigan State was 9 of 18 on third down, 3 of 4 on fourth down. That's not going to cut it. And just even when they had mistakes by Michigan State, there'd be penalties. There was that holding that negated a Kenneth Walker touchdown run. And then on 3rd and goal from the 15, Joey Porter Jr. gets called for pass interference on a ball that probably was not going to be caught. And Michigan State scores 2 plays later, whatever it was. Missed tackles that even though they may not have always led to a first down, made it 3rd and 3 instead of 3rd and 8, stuff like that. Just poor play from the defense, missed opportunities. And like you said, Tim, it really was disappointment because this was probably the worst game the defense has played all season. I know they gave up more points to Ohio State, but anyone who watched that game, knowing the power of the Ohio State offense, will tell you Penn State's defense played a tremendous game. And also Ohio State scored non-offensive points in that game that made their point total higher than it really was offensively. So it was definitely a letdown day from the defense. And I think too, like, it's Michigan State. Like, this kind of stuff only happens against them. Snowstorms, 2-hour delays for thunder and lightning. The one time all year the defense looks inadequate and inept with everything. Like, this stuff only happens. And usually it only happens in East Lansing also. Just, I don't know what it is, but yeah, it was extremely frustrating on so many fronts today because this was a game that Nittany Lions probably should have won, or at least had every opportunity in the world to win. And even when Michigan State tried to keep giving them opportunities with turnovers, with penalties, things like that, Penn State just couldn't take advantage.
Right. And that's the other thing too. The penalties. I lost. It seemed like anytime it seemed like a running joke to me that the referees would bail Sparty out of a bad play with a false start penalty, because then right after that they would come up with a play to move the chains or at least get it to like 3rd and manageable. So I mean that was really bad. That was really frustrating to me too. The fact that Sparty got penalized. I'm pulling up the stats here.
I have it up in front of me. Michigan State had 7 penalties for 50 yards. And it felt like more, but I think it felt like more because they were big penalties. Like I said, there was that holding called back the touchdown. That one false start, it's 4th and 1. That I don't know what Michigan State was trying to do, but Jaquan Brisker completely blew it up. Almost looked like a fumble going the other way, but regardless, it was going to be Penn State's ball. And instead, they get another chance on 4th and 6 and they convert. Like, just things like that you can't have if you're Penn State's defense. And it's just, that was the difference in this game.
I mean, yeah, you said it. I guess turning our focus to the offense now, Michigan State, we all knew this is the worst pass defense in the country. Cliff threw it 34 times. Frank understands a snowstorm, but frankly, they should have thrown it a bit more. Now, like you said before we hit start on this broadcast, Kevon Lee did have a decent game, 79 yards and 15 carries, ripped off a nice 33-yard game, which kind of sadly was one of Penn State's best runs all season long. That tells you how porous the run game's been. But I would have definitely liked to see them throw the ball a bit more. What especially stuck out to me was it was 4th and 1. They just, I think they're looking to retake the lead after giving it back up. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe they're going to throw something short to Dotson or Parker Washington or maybe Brenton Strange, whatever. Instead, they hand it off to Kevon Lee. Mike Miranda the center gets pushed back a few yards, and Lee has nowhere to go. Now, I guess to be fair to the Mike Yursich, they did see Penn State had favorable numbers in the box. I think Sparty had maybe 6 people. So you would think in a 4th and 1 situation where Sparty is seemingly anticipating a short pass of some kind, you should be able to just run it up the gut, pick up the first down. So it's hard to blame Kevon for that one. That's probably falls more on the O-line. But again, I would have liked to have seen them try to get the ball into their best player's hands, and that's Jahan Dotson. So that stuck out to me. And just it seemed like they were trying a little too hard to establish a run. And I get doing that to keep a defense honest. But again, this was a team, they were having success throwing it on them for the game. I mean, why they abandoned from it, I just really don't understand. I'm kind of lost for words.
Yeah, and it was something I said on Twitter early in the game. It's like, all right, you're Penn State. You have not run the ball all year. You're facing statistically the worst pass defense in the entire country, and you're trying to establish a running game. I didn't get it. It was mind-boggling. Like you said, in the second half, Michigan State won with a lot more their 2 deep safety split look, so it opened up what should have been running lanes. But, man, on that 4th and 1, that you referenced, just Kevon never had a chance because by the time he got the ball, Mike Miranda was 4 yards in the backfield with the nose tackle driving him back. It's just there was nothing when that's the effort you get up front. I don't care if you have Barry Sanders or Saquon Barkley in the backfield; it's not going to matter. And too many times this year, that's what's happened for Penn State on 3rd and 4th and short is the offensive line just gets whipped and never gives a running back or Cliff or whoever it is a chance. And we saw that again today. It's just, again, like I said, what to me I think was most frustrating about this loss was it was so many of the same mistakes we've seen time and time again. No push from the offensive line, 3 and 4 man rushes getting home on passing downs, penalties at the worst possible times, not taking advantage of mistakes by your opponent. Just the things that have burnt this team and the things that have caused this team to go from being 5-0 and looking like they're about to take it to Iowa and establish themselves as a legitimate playoff contender to stumbling to a 2-5 finish with your only wins being Rutgers and Maryland.
And that kind of brings me to my next point. This reminded me very much, and I'm a bit of an older fan. I've been following a team for 30 years now, and this reminded me. I finally realized this reminded me of the 1992 season, and stop me if you heard this. Penn State gets off to a nice 5-0 start. They're ranked in the top 10. They play the number 2 team second weekend of October, and they lose a close one. That team goes on to finish the season 7-5. Their only wins being against a bad Pitt team and a mediocre West Virginia squad. So, and that team also had a stud receiver by the name of O.J. McDuffie, who went on to be a first-round draft pick for the Dolphins in the 93 NFL draft. So it's another – I kind of get vibes from that. Like similar to how the Miami game broke Penn State, I feel like that Iowa game, when Cliff got hurt, P.J. Musford goes down, a few other guys went down of injuries. It just – that the way they lost that game, when they looked like they were going to boat race them, and then Iowa just gradually comes back to win. And then of course the Illinois loss following, it just kind of felt like that just broke them, and they never really recovered from it. And here we are now, 7-5. This thing about what a lost season this was, feeling bad for Jahan Dotson, like he deserved better than to go out like this. If this was indeed his last game in a Penn State uniform. Now, maybe he still plays the bowl game, but, in this day and age of players who know they're going to enter the draft sitting out non-new playoff or New Year's Six games, who knows? I guess we'll find out. So, Marty, what is there – has this season reminded you of any prior seasons that you've been following?
I don't know. I think it's tough because, obviously the 92 season, like I talked about before we came on the air, I was alive for the 92 season, but I'm not old enough to remember the 92 season. I think a lot of people will point to 99 also. Now, that was a little bit different because the Minnesota loss came when they were, 8? And I think it was?
Yeah.
It was a lot later in the season. It was a lot later in the season than the Iowa loss was this year. And, there were some similarities there, though, because the Minnesota loss – there was a lot of things that had to go right for Minnesota to even get them in position to attempt that field goal. Just like there were a lot of things that had to go right for Iowa to get them in position to take that lead late in the game. But no, to me, this is definitely
that game also had a crippling 4th and long catch.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Where Minnesota got pretty damn lucky on that play to even get into that position to attempt the field goal, because that's definitely one of those plays that 9 times out of 10 goes in favor of the defense. But this season of the Penn State seasons I've been able to watch as like a teenager and above to where I'm really invested and remember them well. This is definitely one of the most frustrating. I think 2017 is probably still the most frustrating to me because that was a legitimate, not just playoff contender, but team that could have won the national championship had they just not thrown up all over themselves in the last 12 minutes of the Ohio State game. But, this is a year where you look at who's going to potentially be in the playoff. Like, you've got Alabama right now fighting for their lives. Cincinnati is a group of 5. Notre Dame, who's not very impressive. Like, you just sit there and wonder, what if Sean Clifford doesn't get hurt against Iowa And right now, even if you still lose to Ohio State, you very well could be at 11-1 right now and maybe in a position to sneak in there as an at-large, or who knows? It's just that's where it gets so frustrating because this season seemed to have so much promise. At first, the season reminded me a lot of 2019, and you were coming off of a lackluster 2018 season where you went 9-4. In 2019, you bounced back, start 9-0, wind up 11-2 with a Cotton Bowl victory. And this year, early on, seemed a lot like that, where they were going to come back, prove that last year was a fluke, and be back on track. But now, all of a sudden, you're stuck. And I know you can cherry pick stats and things of that nature, but ultimately, the last 2 seasons, Penn State they are what the record says they are, to steal a quote from Mike Tomlin. And the last 2 seasons, they're 11-10. And they're 8-10 in the Big Ten. And even if you go back to the tail end of 2019, they finished that season 3-2 down the stretch. So they have really struggled to build upon what they were putting in place when they had 3 11-1 seasons out of 4 years with 3 New Year's Six bowl berths and 2 victories. And this is a big offseason for James Franklin. He just got that new contract, the new commitment from the university for the improved facilities and things of that nature. There's got to be coaching staff changes. First and foremost, one that I could see happening that I don't want to see happen, I don't think very many Penn State fans like to see happen, is the odds of Billy Napier still coaching in Louisiana Lafayette in 2 or 3 weeks, if not sooner, probably about 0. And I could see Brent Pry taking that job. You don't want to lose Pry. He's been a terrific defensive coordinator this season, but I think on the offensive side of the ball, obviously Mike Yurcich is not going anywhere. I feel confident saying Taylor Stubblefield's job safe because Penn State receivers have been awesome the last 2 years. But I do think that you have to, if not change some things up on that coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball, at least have to put some guys on notice, because overall the performance of the offense, especially in the trenches this year, has just not been good enough.
Right. Just like I said last week, what is it with coaches? Was it with they announcing these big extensions for coaches and then the teams going and laying an egg the fall that week? Saw with Sparty last weekend at Ohio State. Now, granted, Penn State didn't lose 56-7, but still definitely did not look as sharp as you were hoping they would. And of course, all the 10 more years of this jokes aside, I do agree that there's going to be this is a big offseason for James Franklin, and I would think now that he's gotten a commitment from the university to upgrade facilities for better name and likeness marketing, to better athlete dorms, just all these off-field improvements that can help entice better recruits, which in turn can lead to better play. Or if the injury bug, maybe you lose a couple guys, starters, but you got very talented backups that can step in, and you're not going to miss much of a beat, if any beat. You see it with teams like Alabama, like Georgia, Ohio State. And I know they lost today to Michigan, but generally Ohio State's like that as well. So, all these little facelifts that desperately need to be done, regardless who the coach is. Like, even if Franklin, say, had left, I'll tell you what, the next person who would have come in, whether it was Luke Fickell or Matt Rule, whoever, they'd be demanding the same things as what Franklin was demanding. So people there making the snarky, well, if we just build a new facility, maybe that's not going to, we'll coach better or something or whatever. Just comments like that. Like, just understand that even if you get your wish, the next guy who comes in is going to be demanding the same level of commitments, if not more, than what Franklin's demanded. So that being said, despite how frustrated we all are, how frustrated I was today, we saw the Slack messages we're all sending each other. But I am glad that we're not on the coaching Penn State's not on the coaching carousel right now, because it's going to be a wild one, especially when Matt Campbell likely leaves Iowa State. It sounds like he's trending towards USC at the moment. And like I said, Billy Napier probably heading to Florida from what it sounds like. And Now, and of course, they may go after Brent Pry if that happens. I guess the question is now, perhaps with this new contract, I would think assistant salaries went up again as well, including Brent Pry's. So the question now becomes for Brent Pry, does he value money more than he values being a head coach somewhere?
Well, I think the one thing that might be the question for Brent Pry is how much do you value a happy wife? Because his wife is a Louisiana native who he met while on the staff down at Lafayette back in the day. So that could be, and now on Pry's end, he is an Altoona, Pennsylvania native who, for those who don't know, Altoona is only about a half hour or so from State College. And
well, 45 minutes, but
less than an hour. So,
yeah.
And I know he still has family in Altoona. So, that could always factor into things also. I will say, though, with this offseason, especially considering Napier is most likely going to leave, if he does stick around, I feel confident saying Pry and his family are very content with him just staying at Penn State's defensive coordinator, which, I've been critical of Pry in the past, but ultimately I think anybody would take that. Yes, the defense struggled today, but I've said all season long, and I stand by it, I think this is the best coaching job Brent Pry has done as Penn State's defensive coordinator, especially up front. Now, obviously, John Scott Jr. deserves a lot of credit for the success of the defensive line also, but to lose 3 of your projected 4 starters from the preseason at some point during the year and have to throw young guys who probably weren't ready to be playing big minutes into the fire and see them succeed the way they did, Pry and Scott Jr. both deserve a ton of credit for that. So, and I think one thing with Pry, we really saw him grow as a coach this year, where a lot of his blitz schemes and things of that nature became a lot more exotic than they were in years past, which led to an improved pass rush from the Nittany Lions and getting to the quarterback. And I know the sack numbers weren't quite as high as they've been in the past, but anyone who watched Penn State will tell you that their defense made life a living hell on quarterbacks most of the season. Even today included, they were in Peyton Thorne's face a lot, just a lot of missed tackles and things of that nature that came back to burn them. But no, with the coaching staff, I'm definitely in the group of people who are extremely frustrated with the Franklin regime and where things are at right now. I think everyone would agree the performance the last 2 seasons has not been acceptable or up to the standards of Penn State.
And Franklin will tell you that too, probably.
Exactly. James Franklin, the first person to tell you that going 4-5 and then 7-5 is not acceptable. But at the same time, like you said, this coaching carousel, as wild as it's going to be, with LSU on the market, Florida on the market, USC on the market, excuse me, some of the top names like a Luke Fickell, like a Dave Aranda, appear to be close to signing extensions and staying at their schools. And there's a heck of a lot of smoke for Lincoln Riley to LSU. So even if that happens, then Oklahoma opens up. So you're competing with another, college football playoff level program in a coaching search. So it's definitely a year, I wouldn't want to be on the coaching market. Not to get totally off topic, but that was one of the reasons why I was kind of surprised Florida did move on from Dan Mullen instead of just kind of chalking it up and seeing what happens next year and moving on, just because you're the teams you're competing with. But yeah, it's definitely a year where not being on the coaching market, and especially a position like Penn State where you have a coach who's had the success Franklin has had in the past, definitely a good year to not have to be looking for a head coach, I feel.
Right. You mentioned Oklahoma as well could open up. That would be another big blue blood to be competing with. I guess looking around the Big Ten, speaking of blue bloods, Ohio State goes down to Michigan for the first time in 10 years. Michigan knocks off Ohio State 42-27. They clinch the Big Ten East. They will face Iowa next week for all the Big Ten marbles because Wisconsin got beat on the road at Minnesota, 23-13. Artie, how do you see this Big Ten championship game shaking out next week? Does Iowa have a shot? And if Michigan does make the playoff, how do you think they would fare?
First off, if Michigan does make the playoff, I'm assuming they're the 2 or 3 seed, and it's like with the way their defense plays. Would it really surprise you to see them get the national championship game and then play Georgia? Because, who are they going to play? Cincinnati, maybe Oklahoma State or Oklahoma. It's just I could definitely see that happening.
I feel like Cincy's going to get the 4th seed. the way this is.
Yeah, and that's my thing. I think if Cincy does get in, the committee will put him at the 4 seed. So you're probably looking at like a one-loss Big 12 champion, a one-loss Notre Dame, who quite frankly has no business being anywhere near the playoff, but by process of elimination may do it. As for next week, I mean, it's tough for me. Like personally, I'd love to see Iowa win. Not that I like Iowa or anything, but just – and I know we had a really long discussion about this in our Black Sheet Irish Slack channel earlier. And Tim, I know you and I are on the same page. Michigan reaching the playoff is not good for Penn State because Michigan now can, on the recruiting trail, can go out there and flash a more recent win over Ohio State. If they can flash a more recent Big Ten championship and the fact they've been to the playoff when Penn State hasn't, that's a game changer in recruiting. And Michigan's already a school that has a bigger brand than Penn State. Even though Penn State has unequivocally been the better program the last 15, 16 years, I think in the eyes of a lot of people, they still see Michigan as a better program. So having a season like this that kind of reaffirms those things is not good for the Nittany Lions and just makes – and really for the Big Ten as a whole, because it's similar to the ACC with Clemson. You have that one school in Ohio State who is your playoff bell cow, and you just know, hey, if we can overcome the Buckeyes, we're in good shape. Well, if it becomes we can overcome the Buckeyes and the Wolverines – that makes it more challenging for everybody. So, I mean, I said I will be rooting for Iowa next week. I don't think they'll win. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a low-scoring defensive battle. Ultimately, though, I think Michigan, especially Blake Corum looking healthy again today, and Caden McNamara continuing to come along with that passing game, I think Michigan will have enough firepower to get it done.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to pick Michigan next week too. I mean, I think that Iowa secondary is still right for picking, and McNamara is a good enough thrower that they can get a few big plays, just like they did on Ohio State today. And the fact that they can run the ball too must be nice. I wonder what that's like.
I know we haven't seen that, and like what's frustrating now with Penn State is like you look at some of the backs they've had in the last 6-7 years with Saquon, Miles Sanders, and Journey Brown, and it still feels like we've never been able to consistently run the ball at any point.
Speaking of Michigan, and we kind of discussed this before we started the broadcast, but a year ago around this time, the Michigan fan base looked a lot like what Penn State's fan base seems right now. Okay, maybe the majority of the fan base was okay with Harbaugh, sticking around or being given another chance. But you had a kind of a more growing, or at least a vocal faction that wanted him canned, or was hoping he would just leave for the NFL. And you look at him now. They made a whole bunch of changes in the offseason to his assistants, got a bunch of younger, hungrier guys in there, guys from the NFL. Mike McDonald, his defensive coordinator, came from the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe he made some other changes behind the scenes, but whatever else he did, it sure as hell worked. Look at him now. And it goes – and like you said, big offseason for James Franklin. I would imagine – now I don't think he's going to do a wholesale changing of his assistants, but I would imagine he's going to take a good look under the hood, see what's wrong, how he can best fix it, try something else. I mean, I would imagine, that'll be the case. So I guess as far as what I'm trying to say is, nothing is set. And I see people saying, well, 10 more years of this, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay. And there's no guarantee. First of all, if we don't get over the hump in the next 3 years, I think Franklin leaves on his own accord after 2024 season, whenever Drew Allar's gone, we'll say. But that aside, I think there's always a possibility Penn State come out and surprise some people next year. And I'm not saying, they win the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten like Michigan did. But, you come out, have like a 9-10 win season perhaps, get back to a New Year's 6 bowl game, at least show some real positive momentum going forward. Perhaps bring on, the 2023 class off to a good start too, like the 22 class is bringing in. So, it could definitely help towards, like you mentioned this, Marty, in the Slack channel, but stacking class upon class similar to 22, that's what's going to be important going forward. And my hope is with this new contract that, showing that there's stability, that Franklin's going to be there for the long haul, that'll at least, I'm sure it can't hurt.
Yeah.
23, 24 kids. I'm sure, they watch TV, they look on the internet, they probably get rumors floated to them by opposing coaches that are recruiting them that, oh, Franklin's not going to be there your whole time you're there, blah, blah, blah. So I think, I'm saying I think there are going to be a good amount of changes and you never know. I mean, the schedule does look tough for next year. Not going to lie, just like this year did. But they could. You never know. Maybe some of the teams that look daunting, they may be surprisingly mediocre or bad, or you just never know. Is what I'm trying to say. Nothing's set in stone.
Yeah, and I think one thing too with Penn State, looking ahead to next season, we'll find out who they are quickly. Now, I said that coming into this year and things look good because they're the season schedule, but next year you start at Purdue, week 3 you go to Auburn, games 5 and 6 are Ohio State and Michigan at home. You have a bye week, and then you have Illinois and Michigan State. So that's your first, 8 games include games at Purdue, games at Auburn, at Michigan, and Ohio State, Michigan State at home. So when that's 5 of your first 8 games, you're going to find out in a hurry what kind of football team you are. Now, I definitely think the recruiting aspect of it, like you said that I mentioned earlier, stacking classes, stacking those top 5 to 8 type of classes is something James Franklin has not done for as well as he's recruited. His only true top 5 class came in 2018. And unfortunately, that class really, for the most part, did not pan out. And that's why it's important to stack these classes, because if you stack 2, 3 classes like that in a row, one class doesn't super pan out, doesn't come back to bite you the way it has. Because, I mean, if you look at Penn State and you look at that class, like obviously Michael Parsons is a freaking dude, but he only played 2 years here because of COVID. Odafe Owe for the Ravens, if it wasn't for Parsons, would probably be the defensive rookie of the year in the NFL. And it was probably like second half of last year where you saw the wheels really starting to spin for him. And he went to the league after 3 years. And outside of those two, like there's just a lot. I mean, and it wasn't all their fault. There were some guys who had heart conditions, who had to retire early, and just a variety of things. But that's why it's important to stack those classes. Like I said, this 2022 class, I think right now on the 247 Sports Composite rankings is like 4th or 5th in the country. Next couple weeks, they might drop a couple spots as teams add more, but they're going to finish top 8 to 10 at the worst. The 2023 class, not only with commitments, but with where they stand with a lot of top highly rated prospects off to a great start. So they appear primed to stack those classes. That said, it is important to bounce back on the field next year, because you can't have 3 consecutive mediocre seasons and continue to sign top recruiting classes. I don't care who you are, unless you're Nick Saban or whoever the coach is at Ohio State, it's not going to happen. So it's very important for them to bounce back on the field next year, and it's going to be a challenge. And this kind of, like I said earlier, this is a big offseason for Franklin. Next year, you're going to be looking to break in a new quarterback, most likely, potentially a true freshman, depending on how things shake out between now and then. Your offensive line has a long way to go. The running game needs fixed. You're going to be replacing a lot of guys on defense. I expect Penn State to hit the transfer portal hard again this offseason, especially after the success of this past offseason. Because, I mean, man, can you imagine where this team is at without Arnold Ebiketie or without Derek Tangelo? I mean, even though he got beat for a touchdown today, even Johnny Dixon, who has played good this year and is going to be a starter at cornerback next season. So the transfer portal is a new thing, really, still in college football. And Penn State used to success this past offseason. I think they used a lot again this offseason. And like I said, it's a big offseason for Franklin. They have a lot of questions that need answered, and they're going to be, facing a gauntlet from the get-go next year. And I think in a bad way, they got to bounce back, and they got to find a way to probably get the 9 wins next year to really right the ship, or else you start to really worry about any sort of downward spiral or anything of that nature with this program. And maybe downward spiral is a harsh term, because I'm not saying they're going to become, what USC became under Clay Helton at the end or anything like that. I don't think they'll ever be that bad, but you see where you want to be getting further and further away is what I'm getting at. And you kind of get stuck in that mediocrity land of constantly winning 7-8 games instead of where they were a few years ago, winning 10 plus every year.
Well, part of the reason why I was talking about 1992 and why I also was saying, nothing is set in stone necessarily. The following 2 years, 1993, they go 10-2. Only losses were to Michigan and Ohio State. They get a win over a top 10 Tennessee team in the Citrus Bowl. And then they use that as a springboard the following year, 1994, to go undefeated, win the Big Ten, win the Rose Bowl, and subsequently get screwed by the pollsters who voted Nebraska number one because there was no BCS or playoff back then. But if there was, I have no doubt in my mind they would have won it because that offense was and will remain the greatest offense I've ever seen in my life. No offense to the 2001 Miami squad. But that's so it would be nice if the 22, 23 teams could follow a similar kind of trajectory. Like I said, it would definitely help Franklin's prospects for recruiting and just help, just the programs and the perspective of the program in general, just not continue to wallow in mediocrity like they've been doing these past couple of seasons. And unexpectedly, even just a 9-3 season in 2022 could go a long way towards changing perspective, especially let's say they go 9-3 and they at least, beat Ohio State or they, split between the Michigan schools. Can't be going 0-3 against Ohio State, Michigan State.
Yeah, which is something that's happened way too often with Franklin.
To be fair, let's say during that 4-year stretch where they got 3 11-win seasons and in 4 years, they avoided that except 2018 when they did.
Right.
But before the only other time that happened, this is the only other time in a non-sanctioned. I mean, not saying, but the first 2 years they were still reeling from sanctions roster-wise. They didn't have the full allotment of scholarship kids, so I can sort of excuse it in a way.
Yeah, and I think there's probably plenty of Penn State fans out there who don't want to hear this. But honestly, the on-field results in 2014, 2015, you can throw those out the window because James Franklin in 2014, 2015, his job wasn't necessarily to win football games. It was to get this program, get the roster back to where it needed to be, put his culture in place, things of that nature because of where they were at that point with their roster. You're going up against Ohio State in 2014, for example, who goes on to win the national championship, and your starting offensive line has a walk-on and 2 former defensive tackles who, no knock on Brian Gaia or Derek Dowry, especially Gaia, who went on to have a decent career, weren't guys who should have been playing offensive line in the Big Ten. And they still almost beat Ohio State that year. So, but yeah, I agree with you where those first 2 years, a lot of that stuff kind of just goes out the window. But I think a big issue is if Penn State's going to get to where they want to be, they need to have more seasons where they're going 2-1 against Ohio State and the Michigan schools and start having seasons where they're 3-0. They've never gone 3-0 under Franklin against Ohio State and the Michigan schools. And I think 16 when they beat Michigan State and Ohio State, 2019 when they beat both
Michigan.
Yeah, I got waxed by Michigan. And then 2019 and 2020, they beat both Michigan schools but lost to Ohio State. Every other year, they've been 1-2 or 0-3 against them. And that's just ultimately, if you're going to get to where you want to be, you have to beat those top teams in your conference. And while Penn State has had tons of success, the last going on 2 decades now, really ever since that 2005 team, in the eyes of many people, they're still the 4th best program in this conference behind Ohio State, Michigan State. And no one's going to argue with you about Ohio State. But in this word to circle back to Michigan, the playoff talk where it hurts them, the brand of it, Michigan's the bigger brand. In the eyes of a lot of people, Michigan and Michigan State are the better programs. And until Penn State starts to beat them more consistently, that is not going to change. And, Mel Tucker appears to have a good thing going at Michigan State. And, it doesn't seem like they're going to have the drop-off post-D'Antonio like a lot of us quite honestly, myself included, expected to see happen in East Lansing.
Yeah, no, it's a testament to what Mel Tucker's done there to obviously hitting the portal hard, but I'm sure he's known as a good recruiter, and I'm sure he'll they'll develop the kids they bring in well, and get them back to where they were. I don't know if that means reaching the playoff like they did under D'Antonio, but certainly be a team that's winning 9, 10 games a lot of years. Being once again that Big Ten East is like the division of death. With 4 teams that are capable of beating up on each other any given year. So, certainly not what we all thought we'd see so quickly when D'Antonio retired. We thought they'd be down for a few years, but that's certainly thrown a wrench into things. I guess looking ahead now, obviously the regular season's over. Penn State will await their bowl fate, which comes up next Sunday when the playoff is announced and the New Year's Six bowls. Going into today, if they have the best case they were looking at was probably an Outback Bowl bid if they had won, but with the loss, they're looking at probably likely 3 destinations: Music City in Nashville, the Las Vegas Bowl, and then the Pinstripe Bowl in New York. If you had to guess, Marty, which of those bowls do you think is likely to take them?
I mean, I have no doubts all 3 of them would gladly take Penn State because Penn State's still a big brand. They've got an alumni base and fan base that's going to travel. They're going to do good numbers on TV. I'm not sure the pecking order of the 3. I think the Vegas Bowl is the highest of the 3 when it comes to that. If that's the case, I would guess that's probably where they land. I think we talked about this last week on the show, if I remember correctly. Personally, I'd love to see the Pinstripe Bowl. To me, that's a game because James Franklin's first year going to the Pinstripe Bowl and beating Boston College the way they did, the first time back to a bowl game after the scandal and everything. Like, that's just one of those bowl games as a Penn State fan. I'm sure a lot of Penn State fans out there agree with me. It'll always hold a special place in your heart because that bowl game meant a lot to the program and the cap off James Franklin's first season that way. And it was a really exciting game too. Went to overtime and everything. So I would love to see a return to the Pinstripe Bowl for that reason, but I'm guessing probably the Vegas Bowl because I believe that's the top of the 3 in the pecking order. But we'll see what happens. Regardless of where they go, they're probably going to wind up with an opponent that is definitely beatable. So we'll see what happens. It's just I don't know. It's frustrating to sit here and think about it because we said when you're 5-0 and leading Iowa 17-3 in the second half of the second quarter, I never in a million years thought we'd be sitting here debating between Vegas, Nashville, and New York City as the postseason destination.
It's amazing what a quarterback getting hit the wrong way will do to your season.
Yeah, really. It's just, it's just so frustrating. I know the offensive line this year has had its struggles, but if there's one play, they just could have picked up that blitz where Cliff gets rid of that ball a second sooner. And the thing is too, the frustrating. This is just me probably being a miserable degenerate about it at this point. If you go back to that play, if he has a split second to throw, he has Brenton Strange wide open. It's probably a touchdown, and it's 21-3 at that point. Worst case scenario, it's 1st and goal. So that just makes it even worse to where if he does, instead of getting pummeled on that play and getting injured, is able to get off a good throw. Penn State's looking at a worst case scenario, 1st and goal while leading 14-3, and very likely go up 21-3. And at that point, that game probably, even with Clifford out, would have been over.
Yeah, I guess if I had to guess, I'm thinking Vegas or Music City. I know Music City would love to have James Franklin make a little homecoming to, the place where he got his head coaching start at Vanderbilt. I'll keep an eye on that one. That or Vegas. I know Pinstripe would be interesting to see, especially like I said, that's the site of, where Franklin's first bowl win happened, or the first, Penn State's first bowl game since the sanctions were lifted happened, and just great game all around. But I don't know, Vegas could be an interesting play, and I'm sure for degenerates like yourself that would be preferred destination for a bowl game if you can't go to a nice Florida bowl.
I mean, I feel very confident in saying my wife would never ever be happy or comfortable unleashing me in Vegas with my my degenerate ways when it comes to sports gambling. So
Maybe that's a good thing.
yeah.
Well, Marty, anything else to add? Still have any words left after all
No,
this?
I don't think so. It's just like I said, it's frustration is the word that reigns supreme right now. I'm feel sure most Penn State fans will agree with that. In State College in Happy Valley, 7-5 is never going to cut it, especially after the way this season started with such promise. And I mean, even coming in today, it was like, you know what? Yeah, we should be better than 7-4 right now, but you win this one. You have 3 wins over top 25 teams. You can potentially get into the Outback Bowl. Regardless, put yourself in a position to go 9-4, get a bowl win, probably have 4 wins over top 25 teams at that point. Just it didn't come to fruition. And yeah, like I said, it's a big offseason for James Franklin because there's a lot of questions in this program that need answered. There's a lot of things that need cleaned up, and it starts with the guy at the top. And my wife and I were talking about this before you and I started recording, and she said to me, I was just kind of complaining about last year and this year. And then she said about, the COVID stuff last year and injuries this year. And I said, yes, but when you're making $85 million, you got to find a way to make it work. And I think that's where they're at right now as a program. I mean, the Franklin extension, regardless how people feel about it, good on the program for committing because I'm hopeful that we finally have gotten the commitment out of them that is needed. There also seems to be a lot of positive buzz about what's going to happen moving forward with the new university president and things of that nature in terms of the football program. But that's all off-season talk. I'm sure we'll have plenty of shows in the off-season to delve into things of that along those lines. But
I'm sure we'll speak with Mark during the off-season to discuss such things.
Exactly. So yeah, big off-season ahead for Franklin. And ultimately, I know we've talked about the guy a million times on here this year, but with Drew Allar coming in, I definitely feel like it's an now or never type of situation. The one thing this program has lacked under him is that truly elite quarterback. In a lot of ways, Sean Clifford's kind of held the program back in recent years, which is funny because this year not having him is what held them back. But you finally bring in that quarterback who should be your game changer, could potentially be your Deshaun Watson, what Deshaun Watson was to Dabo Swinney and Clemson, that get you over that hump. So we'll see what happens. But, until then, it's going to be a longer offseason than I think was originally anticipated for Penn State fans.
Right. And I guess I forgot exactly what I was going to say. But, well, actually, yeah, about with Drew Allar coming in, I do feel like these next few years are really going to be, I think, make or break. I know I saw a bunch of, angry fans on Twitter going, 10 more years of this stuff, but no, it's really the next 3 years are going to be the most, if they can get over the hump with, with Allar eventually quarterbacking the team, win the Big Ten, get to the playoff finally, then, okay, he'll probably stick around as long as he feels like it. But if not, though, they don't get over the hump, then I get the feeling probably after 2024 he ends up leaving for another job. I may have a hard time seeing him actually get fired, but he'll
especially the way that contract's written. It's
right.
Jackson did a terrific job of getting him a contract where he basically is not fireable.
Not fireable, but his buyout gets pretty low after a couple years, and it'll be easy for him to get bought out by somebody else. So hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully this incoming class, Drew Allar, Nick Singleton, Sutton, rest of the crew, hopefully the subsequent 23, 24 class that come in also can help get this team over the hump. We'll see. Going to be an interesting off season, probably an interesting next few years at least, how things are going. But just want to first to give a shout out. Thanks to Mark Rogers TV for hosting us, helping put together this post-game show for us to do week by week. I hope those of you who have tuned in have enjoyed watching Marty and I, or also Ellie, Clay, Jared, some weeks banter with each other, whether it was a win or a loss. I think we all had fun times doing this. We're not sure yet what the plans will be for the bowl game. Obviously, it hasn't been announced yet, but perhaps, hopefully, we'll be doing a post-game show for Vegas or Music City or Pinstripe, whatever game they end up in. In the meantime, however, you can go check out Marty and I's work at Black Shoe Diaries as well as the rest of our colleagues. Marty, you're working into 3 takeaways right now. I'll have my position grades up tomorrow per usual. And also, as I said before, blackshoediaries.com. That's we cover Penn State sports year round, and it's not just football. We're getting into the winter sports. Wrestling team looking to get back to their national title winning ways. Hockey's in full bloom. And shout out to the men's basketball team. They waxed Oregon State today by 15 points in the consolation game of the Emerald Coast Classic down in Florida. They took a talented LSU team to overtime last night, a team that, frankly, they were projected to lose by double digits against. But, Micah Shrewsbury is thus far, he's done a pretty good job, as far as getting the kids he's got to work with to play up to his liking. And he's got just like Franklin, he's got a tremendous 2022 recruiting class. Tremendous for Penn State standards, but still got some studs in the class coming in, which can.
It was highest rated class in program history. So
it's highest rated class in program history. It's like a top 20 class, so it's not. I'm not saying like top 50 or something, but top 20 class, which for Penn State basketball is a big freaking deal. So the future looks bright under him, and so check us out. Marty and I help with basketball coverage, so blackshoedrives.com, once again, the place to go to. Whether you're watching us on the Big Ten channel or Penn State channel, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we hope to see you next month after the bowl game.